either want to have read them all by the end of 2025 or unhauled them. Obviously not all of these books would be 5 stars, it would be lovely if they were. If I had interest in reading them, I would have read them by now. That would be a great reward if I could get rid of all of these books on my physical TBR. Hi guys, it's Rachel and welcome back to my physical TBR update video. I haven't done a physical TBR video in quite a long time. I thought the beginning of a new year was a perfect time to just see exactly how many books were on my physical TBR and all the books that I actually want to read this year. I would actually love to say by the end of 2025, the 36 books that are currently on my physical TBR are no longer on my TBR because they've been replaced with new ones. I don't have any like dud ones hanging around. I either want to have read them all by the end of 2025 or unhauled them because I'm no longer interested in them. I don't want any like I said, duds lingering around any longer than this year. So I just thought it'd be really fun and interesting to just sit down and talk you through every single book currently on my physical TBR that I want to try and read this year. So I thought it'd be fun to actually sit down and do a little bit of like a stock take of every single book currently on my physical TBR and just kind of like see where we're at. So at the end of the year, I can have a record of the exact books that were on my physical TBR at the beginning of the year and see how successful I was in actually managing to read them all by the end of this year. So without further ado, let's hop into it because it could be quite a long video. I'm really hoping not. I'm hoping not to talk too much about each of the books because it is just kind of like a little stock take of the books that are on my physical TBR trolley. There are 2 that are on my physical TBR at the beginning of the year that I have already read because I'm filming this video on Monday the 6th of January. So I already had time to read some of the books off my physical TBR at the beginning of 2025, which I have done. So we can already deduct 2 books from my physical TBR account. So it started at 36 and it's now at 34, which is great. And the 2 books I have managed to read already is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna and Spectacular by Stephanie Garber. So those books were on my physical TBR and they are now no longer on my physical TBR. So we're already down to 34 books. And then the rest in no particular order. We have Beautiful Ruins by Jess Walter. This was kindly gifted to me by Emily because it's one of her favourite books. I want to say of like 2024. I want to say I've never heard of this book before, so I have been a little bit intimidated by it, which is why it's still sat on my physical TBR. But like I said, I'm really hoping to get around to all of these books this year. So hoping 2025 is the year that I actually can finally discover why Emily loves this book so much. Have really heard no one talk about this book, so I'm really hoping good things from this because obviously it's a personal recommendation from Emily. So that's the first book on my physical TBR. Once again, in no particular order, the next one is Raiders of the Lost Heart. I literally just picked this book up because it was cheap in the works and I'd heard a few people talk about it. Since picking this up now, I haven't heard the best reviews. I think this is an adult romance with the setting being a little bit of like Indiana Jones. So that's kind of what grasped me. Hopefully it's good. Fingers crossed. Obviously not all of these books will be 5 stars. It would be lovely if they were, but they're not going to be. The next one is The Wedding of the Year, which once again is similar to Raiders of the Lost Heart. I literally just picked this book up because it completed my 3 for £6 deal at the works. Really dangerous going into the works because I pick up books I'm not that interested in and then they end up on my physical TBR for a lot longer than they need to be. But I have only recently picked this book up, only like a couple of months ago. So I'm hoping that I get around to it in the summer this year because it's very much a summery book. And I've been wanting to read this author for quite a while now. And I just feel like I'm never going to get around to her unless I had a physical book of hers on my TBR, which now I do. So there's a purpose for me to actually get around to this author and see if her writing is for me. So hopefully this one will get read in 2025. The next one is The Dark Inheritance, which once again I know nothing about. 2025 I'm hoping to be the year that I reintroduce unheard of books back onto my channel, and there's definitely quite a few in this pile that will succeed in that kind of like area. So hopefully this is definitely going to be one of them because I did randomly just pick this book up at Waterstones. This is a YA though, and I'm definitely coming out of YA, but it basically follows our character who ends up getting a really big inheritance for his 18th birthday, but if he collects his inheritance he will die, and it's kind of like a little bit of a twist. I feel like it definitely reminds me of The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So I'll be intrigued to start this one, hopefully sometime soon. I'm going to say that for everyone. A book that I potentially might unhaul without reading is The Lock-In by Phoebe Luckhurst. I've tried to read this book about 3 times now and I've never succeeded in getting past like the 20-30 page mark, and that is because the average rating on Goodreads is like a 2.64. It's apparently really badly written. Chloe forced herself through it at the end of last year and she said it was really atrociously written, and ever since then I haven't been intrigued to read it. I found out about this book years ago, before it even came out, because the synopsis sounded so good. Basically follows 6 friends who all live together, and they get locked up in their loft when their kitchen sink starts to leak and flood the apartment. It just sounded really good, and Emma Gannon blurbs it on the back, and I don't know about this book. Whether I'll read it or not, I don't know, but this could potentially be a book that I unhaul without reading, which is definitely a way that I want to go this year. I don't want to just keep books on my physical TBR just because one day I might read them, even though I have no interest in reading them whatsoever. If I had interested in reading them, I would have read them by now. So that's another issue we have here. The next one is Friends and Strangers by Courtney J. Sullivan. This book was actually on my 2024 priority TBR and I didn't get around to it, so I'm hoping 2025 is the year that I read it. This is a gift from Chloe, and she brought it just because she said it sounded interesting and a book that I would really enjoy, and it does. So hopefully this year is the year. It's just, the text is tiny, guys. The text is tiny. If you're interested in learning about any of these books, then I'll leave my Goodreads down below as always, and you can go to my physical TBR shelf and all the books will be there and you can find out what they're about, because if I tell you about every single book and their synopsis and my thoughts, then we're going to be here for hours, and I don't want to be here for hours. So the next one is If You Still Recognise Me by Cynthia So. This book was so hyped when I went to Yauk in 2021, 2022? Can't remember. When did I go to Yauk? I've only ever been to Yauk once, so I can't remember the year. One year I went to Yauk and this was so hyped I couldn't even find it anywhere, so then when I got home I found it in my local Waterstones, so then I decided to pick it up. It's a YA. I'm massively coming out of YA now, so whether it's going to be a book that I unhaul without reading, I'm not too sure. I definitely feel like I need to be brutal and do like a physical TBR purge at the beginning of this year before it gets too late and I start to cling on to every book, because I'm a very sentimental person and that potentially could happen. Which wouldn't be ideal. The next one is Ghosted by Jen Ashworth, and this was a book kind of gifted to me, I think by Claire. Yeah, Claire, so thank you very much, Claire. I once again tried to read this book. This is more of like a literary kind of thriller that follows a wife as her husband goes missing, and you have this unreliable narrator because she only reported him missing after like a week and a half, so all kind of fingers are pointing towards her. I was intrigued when I read this. It was just a lot more complex of a writing style than I was expecting when I did start this, so I was kind of like soft DNF'd it, but I do want to return to it because this book's been on my radar since going to Bath in 2021 when I saw the hardback exclusive edition in Topping and Company, so really want to get to this one soon. The next one is the Worst Case Scenario Cookery Club, which once again is a book that I've heard nothing about because I went to Waterstones and saw it and I read the blurb and I was like, oh my god, this sounds exactly like my cup of tea. It definitely reminded me of the vibes of like The Beach Cafe by Lucy Diamond, and this basically follows 4 main characters who all live in a quaint seaside town in New Bay, and one of them is the teacher of this cookery class and 3 of them are his kind of like pupils, and they all have different things going on in their lives where they really feel like this cooking class might kind of like unlock a lot of doors or kind of comfort them in some way, and they all kind of like come together, and it sounds really good. And once again, I've tried reading this, it's just when I was in kind of like a slump, so I didn't want to push myself through it when I could potentially give this book a really high rating. The next one is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkinson. Once again, really intrigued to read this. This was gifted to me by Rhiannon from The Welsh Reader back for my birthday in 2022. One of those years, a year of my birthday, I got this gifted to me by Rhiannon. And I'm really intrigued to read it because this year, in 2025, I do want to start reading more books with more emotional intelligence, more substance than just always reading those fluffy, smutty romances. Nothing wrong with them. I love them. They're great books. I always have a fun time reading them. But I just want to kind of like broaden my horizons a little bit rather than just reading smut all the time, which is no shame, but have a little bit more diversity, Rachel. And this is definitely one of them that fits those boxes. This is a multi-generational family kind of like drama book, which I'm really excited to read and heard really good things about it. I found out about this book from Gabby Reads back when it first came out, and now I've just been putting it off and I don't want to be putting it off any longer, so hopefully I can get it read very soon. The next book is The Invisible Library, and this, once again, I need to stop going into Waterstones and just randomly picking up books because they always just sit on my physical TBR for ages, and this year is definitely a year where I'm going to be buying less physical books anyway. Why I actually want to try and read as many of my physical books that I currently have as possible, because one of my goals is to buy less physical books so I minimise my book collection. So maybe just stopping going into Waterstones and buying random books for the sake of it might be a good way to go, Rachel. But this is one of those books. Randomly went into Waterstones, randomly picked up this book. It sounded interesting. It had a good rating on Goodreads, because I never pick up a book that I've never heard of before without checking the Goodreads rating, because I don't want to be picking up a book that only has like a 2-star average rating. So this one did have a good average rating, so I decided to pick it up. And it basically is like a magical book where you follow our main character, who is a spy, and she works for a mysterious library that harvests fiction from different realities. It just sounds really interesting, and I think it could be a really fun book. I just need to get around to reading it. I read 75 books in 2024. If I read every single book on my physical TBR, which is only, as we discussed, 34 books, that is still half of my year of reading to be reading other books. So it's definitely doable for me to read my entire physical TBR. Let's just hope I can actually do it, because I think that'd be such an accomplishment. Imagine getting my physical TBR down to 0 and then like treating myself to like a really good kind of like mini book spree. Because as I just said, I don't want to be randomly buying books in Waterstones this year, but like that would be a great reward if I can get rid of all of these books on my physical TBR. And not in a bad way, just in like a, I want to read all these books, so why am I putting them off all the time? The next one is another gift from Emily. This is Sophie Kinsella's Can You Keep a Secret? And Sophie Kinsella, I believe, is one of Emily's favourite kind of like contemporary romance authors, and I've only read now 2 of her more recent books, The Burnout and The Party Crasher, and had a really good time with her writing style, and just loved both of those books. I think both of those books got a 4-star from me. So why haven't I read her backlist? Because there are just too many books, too little time, Rachel. That is why. So this is a book that Emily kind of gifted me. There is an audiobook on Everand, so potentially I could listen to the audiobook of this one, but I don't actually know what this one's about. But I'm intrigued because Emily gave it to me, so I'm hoping it's because she loved this book, which I'm sure she did, because she loves Sophie Kinsella. And then we have another book that I saw on Gabby Reads' channel and was like, yes, I need to read this. So I picked it up, and once again, I just haven't prioritised it, and that is Bright Young Woman. And this basically is from the perspective of, I think, a fictional sort of like Ted Bundy case, and it focuses and highlights the woman who has suffered from the hands of these predators and these serial killers, rather than always fictionalizing and romanticizing the actual serial killers, a bit like how like the Netflix documentaries and stuff do. So it's like a narrative of that, and I think that's so interesting, and that's kind of what grasped me to this book. So I'm really hoping I can read it this year, because it's once again one of those books that will have more substance, more emotional intelligence, and a book kind of subgenre that I'm really interested in getting into this year. Then we have a romance trilogy that I got kind of gifted to me, and that is Written in the Stars, Hang the Moon, and Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandra Belther. These are all gifted to me, and I'm really excited to read all of these. These books are actually in my 2025 TBR priority list this year, because I really want to start this series and hopefully finish it all. These are all kind of like sapphic romances, and the first one is a fake dating situation, so I am sold. Get me there. I'm really excited to read all 3 of these. This one I'm a little bit ashamed I still haven't read. I got this book when I went on a massive book spree for my birthday 2 years ago now, so eek. This is an oldie but a goodie on my TBR. I'm really intrigued to read this, but I haven't heard great things, and every single time I check out the average rating on Goodreads, it seems to be going down and down. But this basically follows our main character, who ends up reading a magazine article where it basically says that if by your 7th boyfriend you haven't found the one, it's because you've already found him. So she ends up going back to all her exes and trying to discover if she missed the one that she was meant to be with. It just sounds such an interesting concept and very summery, so I'm hoping I read this in the summertime. Talking about summery books, another book on my TBR is Love Struck by Laura Jane Williams. I used to love Laura Jane Williams as an author. I thought she was incredible. I gave some 5 stars to her books, and then every single time I read her latest release, my enjoyment of them got weaker and weaker. Like, it started off with 2 5 stars, and then a 4, and then a 3, and now I'm just scared to go into other works from her just in case the ratings keep dropping. And this one, synopsis sounds so good. It's dual timeline, in the terms of our main character has a text from her ex, and one timeline is where she replies to that text and she ends up getting back with her ex, and you follow that timeline. And then the other timeline is when she ignores the text from her ex, and you follow that timeline, and you follow both of them in a different kind of like timelines of like what she would have done differently in that situation, because you see both perspectives of what she did when she replied and when she didn't reply. And it just sounds good, but I'm scared that it's going to be like a 2-star, because her trajectory has got worse and worse, which is so sad. A 5-star prediction though is Next to You by Hannah Bowen Young. I have read Out on a Limb and Next of Kin, both being 5 stars by Hannah Boehm Young. So this is definitely a 5-star prediction. Very recent addition to my physical TBR, so I'm not too ashamed to still have it on my physical TBR, and I'm hoping to read it very, very soon because I want to have read all of Hannah Boehm Young's backlist. I love how I can ramble so long about books and not even give you a single synopsis. The next one I have is Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater. I picked this book up when I was with Chloe and Emily in April of last year, so coming up to a year of having this book on my TBR. And this one sounds good, and I know everyone raved about it when it first came out, and sometimes I just want to read a different genre that isn't romance. Do I struggle to do that? Yes. Do I put myself into genre slumps because all I do is read romance? Yes. So do I need options that aren't romances on my physical TBR? Yes. That's why I have this book on there, just for a change of pace on the days that I'm like, you know what, I don't fancy a romance right now. This book will definitely kind of like allow me to enjoy a book, hopefully, that isn't a romance. And I'm really, really excited about this one because it follows a bookseller who is a true crime obsessive, and then Laura joins the bookshop, who is like becomes everyone's favorite bookseller, and I think one of them dies. So I'm really intrigued by that one and hope I can read it soon. One and only, awkwardly and quite annoyingly, the only secondhand book on my physical TBR is The Spark of Light by Jodie Picoult, and this grasped my attention years ago when I don't think the booktuber even makes videos anymore. When she did a 1-minute review of this book, and it sounded so intriguing. This book basically follows a hostage situation where a shooter comes into an abortion center in America, but the timeline is backwards, so the event happens first and then you learn about all the characters and like the hours leading up to the shooting and the hostage as you get further into the book, which is such a fascinating concept that I'm really, really intrigued by. I tried reading it at the end of last year, but in December of 2024, I really kind of was in a bit of a reading funk in terms of like in and out of slumps, so I didn't manage to actually finish it. And then hopefully by reading this one, I'm going to lose my virginity to Lynn Painter. I've heard incredible things about Lynn Painter. I really feel like she made a name for herself in 2024 and everyone fell in love with her books. And I didn't know really where to start with Lynn Painter. I just knew that I kind of wanted to try at least one of her books to see if her writing was my sort of vibe. And I ended up picking Betting on You because it was on the buy one get one half price table when I also got Death of a Bookseller with Chloe and Emily. They kind of vibe in terms of like colour palette, so I picked this one up as well. I believe this one is one of her adult and it's fake dating, so hopefully I'm in for a good time for this one. A book that I've been intrigued to read for years, never thought I'd read it, and then I saw it in the works for £1.25. £1.25, so I was like, you know what? Let's just get it. This is definitely a summery book because it's set on a holiday and it's about a holiday romance. So I really don't think I'm going to be reading it until the sun starts to come out and it gets a little bit warmer, but hopefully I can read it this year. It's not very long at all. I say not very long, it's 350 pages, but with a romance, that's not many pages at all, is it, when you can binge it? Will a tropical escape lead to the perfect romance? I really, really hope so. So that is another book on my TBR. And then a book my mum kind of gifted to me because of my job promotion back in September 2023. Sorry, mum. She gifted me Cat Lady by Dawn Porter. What I feel really bad about is that my mum and dad don't tend to buy me books at all because, one, I earn my own money, which I'm very, very grateful for, and two, they just don't want to double up on books in case I've already brought them, etc. So they don't tend to buy me books, and if people do buy me books, it's a case of like, they give me money and I go book shopping and I create content for it. So it was very, very kind of her to give me this book anyway. And I'm really, really intrigued to read it. I did buy it with her, so she brought it and I picked it out. So it wasn't a case of like she just randomly brought me a book. I don't think she'd ever be that kind of confident in doing that. But I am really, really excited about it. It's literally your slice of life, kind of like woman starting over book. What if the life you're living isn't the one you want? And it just sounds perfect and right up my alley. There is an audiobook on Everand for this, so potentially a way to consume it this year. I just really want to get around to it just so I don't feel bad for my mum for buying me a book that I still haven't read a year and a half later. And then we have Daydream by Hannah Gray. I started reading this once again, end of last year, was in a reading slump, so I didn't end up finishing it. But I am anxious to go into this one because everyone's rating it like a 5-star and saying it's the best in the series. I rated Icebreaker 5-star when a lot of people haven't given that one as much of a higher rating as Daydream. So I'm worried that this one isn't going to be my cup of tea. But everyone loves it, so I really should just get around to reading it. This one follows Hallie and Henry. Henry needs her help to pass an English exam, and then in return, Henry makes Hallie really popular for being part of like the new ice hockey team friendship group. So intrigued to read this one and continue on with a series. And then the most recent book to my physical TBR as of the day I'm filming this is Hello Stranger by Catherine Center, which is a Christmas present from the lovely Emily. So I was gonna say, Emily and Chloe do really up my physical TBR count. And I'm very, very grateful always for all of their kindness. This was the one Emily got me for Christmas, which I'm very, very grateful for. It sounds really good. I had no idea when I was unwrapping this what the book was, and I've been actually intrigued to read Catherine Center for quite a while now. And I'm just intrigued to see what her writing style is. It might be another kind of romance author that I'm really into, and it sounds really interesting, so I'm excited to get to this one. Maybe not as high priority as the ones that have been on my TBR for like 2 years, but definitely, hopefully, like I said at the beginning of this video, a book I'm going to read this year, because I'm going to read all these books this year. I feel like I'm semi-determined to actually do it, because there aren't actually that many books on my physical TBR. I watch people that have like 200, 300, 400 physical books on their physical TBR, and like, go you. I would love to have the space and the capacity and the want to have that, but I'm personally not someone who wants to have that big of a TBR. I'm quite happy having a small TBR and a small selection of books to pick between, and then if I'm really dying to read something, I can go out and buy it and then read it instantly. I quite like that way of reading and constantly switching out my physical TBR. So there's definitely hope that I can actually read all these books this year. The next one is The Rule Book by Sarah Adams, which is the second book in the cheat sheet series. I don't have the cheat sheet on my physical TBR. I'm going to have to read that either on my Kindle or via audio on Everand, but I do have this one, and if I really like this one, then I'll treat myself to the physical copy of the cheat sheet, because I can't have a favourite series not complete on my physical collection. But this is Sarah Adams. I've rated all the books by Sarah Adams that I've read a 5 star, so I have high hopes for this one. I think it's a football romance. Then we have a genre switch of The Last Murder at the End of the World, which has made my 2025 priority list, so this will be a definite book that I read this year. And once again, when I've burnt out of all the romances, there's just a little bit of something on my physical TBR for me to reach to if I fancy a bit of a switch up. What gets me about this one is it kind of follows an island, and as the fog rolls in after like 100 years, people start dying on this island as the fog kind of like starts encompassing them all, and I'm very, very intrigued. I haven't read a Stuart Turton before, so I'm intrigued to see what his writing style is like. And then we've got 2 from the same author and 2 books that were gifted me for my birthday last year from Chloe, Little Fireheads Everywhere and Everything I Know Told You by Celeste Ng. These kind of cover the category of wanting to have more substance this year in my reading, and I'm just being so intrigued to read these for so long, so the fact that Chloe remembered that I spoke about wanting to read both of these books and then got them for me for my birthday, very, very thoughtful and very, very appreciative. And this one has made my 2025 priority list, but obviously, like I said, I'm hoping to read both. Both of them, I believe, have been made into TV shows because they're both very, very popular books, and I'm really excited to read both of them. They both sound really, really good, sort of like a contemporary, more in-depth sort of like murder mystery, especially this one. I don't actually know what this one is about, but I'm excited to read it nevertheless. And then the last few we have is Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake, which is the 3rd book in the Lila Green Doesn't Care series. I'm not sure if it has a different name, but I absolutely love Ashley Herring Blake's middle grades. I've never read one of her romances before. When I found out this one had fake dating in it, I was all there. I added it to my wish list, and Chloe got it for me. Got it for me for just being a good friend. I went out to visit her with Emily last year, and they both got me gifts, and my heart, I love them so much. I love them both so much. And like I said, most of these books I feel like are gifted from Emily or Chloe, so I'm very much appreciative. But when I talked about this book in a previous video, someone in the comments said that you need to read the other 2 books in the series before getting to this one, because although it's a companion series, it is actually better to read these books in order because of spoilers and stuff. So I have this book on my physical TBR that I want to read this year, but I need to read the other 2 books. So I need to read Delilah Green Doesn't Care and Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail before getting to Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. That's a tongue twister of titles. We're on to the final 3. We have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. As you see, I've tried to read this book before. It hasn't gone very well. This is a non-fiction, sort of like memoir book written by Dolly Alderton about kind of like living her life in her 20s and everything she knows about her life. So categories like parties and dating and friends and jobs and life. And I feel like I'm going to get a lot out of this book. But it's not a book that has grasped my attention when I've tried to read it twice previously by reading it with my eyeballs. I need to listen to it. So I have Audible for 3 months for 99p. So I use one of my credits to get this as an audiobook. And it's hopefully an audiobook I'm going to listen to and from work this week. So I might be able to get this book off my physical TBR as soon as humanly possible, which is very exciting because it's been on my TBR for so long that it's actually starting to get annoying that it's on there. So I'm hoping that I can read it this year. A book that I got pretty much exactly a year ago These Hollow Boughs by Lexi Ryan. I heard Lucy from Lucy Rose read this book and said it was really, really similar to The Kiss of Deception. So I was like, yes, I've got to have it. I tried reading it and it wasn't the right time for me. It's one of those books where I knew I was going to enjoy it, it just wasn't the right time. So I put it down, and it's been a year now and I still haven't really picked it up. But it is on Kindle Unlimited, so potentially I could just read it as an ebook and get it off my TBR that way. And then the last book on my physical TBR is Beg, Borrow and Steal by Sarah Adams, which is her latest release that comes out on January 7th, or came out on January 7th, depending on when you see this video. And this is the third book in the When in Rome companion series, and I'm really excited to get to it. It's on my 2025 TBR priority list, it's on my anticipated releases of 2025 list, it's on a lot of lists, and 100% I'll be reading it in January because it's also on my January TBR. So those are all the books I currently have on my physical TBR, my little January 2025 update, and then hopefully in December of 2025 I can come in and give you an update on where we're at with my physical TBR, and hopefully all the books I show in my physical TBR update in December are brand new books because I would have read all 34 of the books I just showed you. Fingers crossed. Let me know in the comments down below if you believe in me and give me some encouragement and say yes, you can do it in the comments down below, because it's definitely doable. It's only half of the number of books I tend to averagely read each year, so it's 100% doable. Every other book that I read this year could be from my physical TBR and I'd get them all read. It's such an exciting prospect that I really, really want to get it done. So leave me some words of encouragement down below, give me some motivation. We have got this. And that is it for this video. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up and subscribe down below to see future content from me. I do everything from weekly reading vlogs, monthly TBRs, and monthly wrap-ups, any other British content you can think of. I usually have on my channel, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.